You want to order
Thank you all for coming, and let's give Drew a big round of applause for this amazing achievement.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, yeah, congratulations. I know what a big process it is to write a book, and it's certainly it's amazing to see it in print.
You know, it's amazing to me. I'm probably the most amazed person of them all. When I started writing this book, I didn't know what I was setting out to do. I was observing things that were happening, and I was observing things that were happening in the world and trying to make sense of those things. And I started with an article that I started to write, and I read the article and I said, hey, this is boring. Nobody wants to read this article, so why not make it fun, right? Why not put it into a story and make it a storyline so that people can read it and understand it and enjoy themselves and be entertained at the same time. Let's just start. I am from Anacostia. I picked this place for a reason. I'm from Anacostia. I grew up a few blocks away, 17th and North Street. I went to Anacostia High School. Yeah, graduated from Anacostia High School. So it's surreal that I'm here in Busboys and Poets. About 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, I was at the Busboys on 14th and B, the flagship location, and I saw books that were on display for sale, and I thought, man, well, how cool would it be if one day I had a book that was sold at Busboys and Poets? I really love this location, and I thought, well, how cool would that be? And I went to the back into a room just like this. It was empty though, and I sat on the stage and I imagined myself talking to an imaginary crowd. And here I am 10, 12 years from then doing that exact same thing, and it feels good. Thank you. It just goes to show you the importance of, thank you very much, it just goes to show you the importance of, commitment, hard work, and follow through, faith, and manifestation. And it feels really good. Thank you all very much for having me or for being here tonight. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. And I appreciate that. My name is Drew Benbow. I'm the author of Devil's Politics. Let's get it going.
Let's do it. So, Drew, let's back up a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about growing up here and some of the events in your life that have sort of shaped your views and how you got to this point?
Yeah, so DC, if anybody remembers DC in the late 80s, early 90s, it was the murder and drug capital of the United States for several consecutive years. And we grew up right in the middle of it. My mom, my sister, and I, we grew up right in the middle of it. 17th R Street, Section 8 housing, that was us. And so it was very much a war zone. And so that sort of shaped my worldview. I ended up joining the Army partly to escape from everything that I saw, everything that I was experiencing. And it wasn't until I left DC that I realized how bad it actually was. But I also had a wonderful childhood, right? So, from time to time we'd have our, power cut off or our gas cut off or whatever, but it wasn't, I didn't realize that it was a hardship. That would be a hardship for other people. When I went to elementary school, junior high school, everybody in the class had lunch tickets. We didn't realize that was it was a thing for disadvantaged kids because everybody was in that environment. So when everybody is in the same boat, it's a lot easier because you kind of have each other to lean on.
And what about the 20 years that you spent in the military? What impact does that have on your writing and how your views have sort of been shaped?
My 20 years in the military probably had a negative impact on my writing and my writing style. And the reason I say that is because being a lawyer, being in the military, when I was in the military, I was a public affairs officer. So journalism, right? So you have three different types of writing. You have journalistic writing, which is quite formulaic. You have military writing, which also is formulaic, there are rules. And then you have legal writing. And all those things, they kind of go against creativity. And so when you are creative, when you're writing creatively, I mean, it's a whole different beast, right? Because you're imagining things and how they're going to be. You're imagining how people are going to interpret your words. You want to put people. If I'm writing about this setting right now, I want to describe the lights. I need to describe, your expression, how the shading on your face. There are lots of things I have to think about to paint that picture. You're not painting that type of picture when you're writing in the military style.
So at what point did you decide that you wanted to write this book of your own and really sit down seriously and start to put it together?
So I always knew that I wanted to write a book, right? I didn't know what about, right? I just knew that it was going to be important. It was going to be something that I was passionate about and something that I knew about. And I was always a writer. I've always written things. I have tons of stories sitting in my email right now that will probably never see the light of day. But when I started writing The Devil's Politics, remember it was 2020, all the protests were happening, and I was trying to make sense of all the chaos that was happening in the world, everything from the protests to COVID, all these things were colliding, and my world was colliding, the whole world was colliding, and I was trying to make sense of that. And I began writing The Devil's Politics in August of 2020, and it kind of wrote itself, frankly. I felt like every time I sat down at the keyboard, I didn't feel like I was writing. I felt like there was some outside energy in my body flowing through my fingers writing this stuff. And it was an incredible experience. And to see this book here today and to see everybody here, to learn about the book and to talk about the book, it's a surreal experience.
How long did that process take from that first sitting down and starting to write through to turning in your manuscript?
All right, so I started at the top of August of 2020, and I think I wrapped up around the end of February of 21 or a little bit after that. And then I sent out a bunch of query letters. So if you're trying to get published, a lot of times you need an agent. So you have to send your query letters out to agents. And someone asked for advice recently about that process, and I told him, I said, if you are writing and you're trying to get published, forget rejection. You're going to have to deal with being ignored, right? And I was straight up ignored a million times. Nobody reached out to me. I got a few rejections, but nobody really reached out to me until a few months later when I ended up with Sequoia and I signed a book deal. And then people started to reach out. Oh, can I get that manuscript? Oh, when are you gonna send that? And I'm like, hey, I already signed a book deal. So from about August of 2021, and I signed the book deal in August of 2020, signed the book deal in May of 21, and a year later, here we are.
Here we are. Awesome. Did you want to read an excerpt before we go into sort of discussing the book a little bit more?
Sure. I'll go ahead and read an excerpt. I want to set it up first, right? So I want to talk about The Devil's Politics just a little bit. So The Devil's Politics is a lot of everything. So it's a story. It's a story of scandal, betrayal, redemption, right? It's a love story. It's also my political manifesto for how I imagine or reimagine Black participation in the American political system, so that we can get to a point where we can reach a greater level of political empowerment in this country. So you have these two brothers, Devon Damion and Devon. They're identical twins. They're from the South. And one is a bad apple. He's always gotten in trouble. And the other one is, he's fairly a good kid. He ended up going to law school. He couldn't pass the bar, so he ended up in D.C. working for a Republican member of Congress. So they become estranged at some point because Damion, the bad apple, and here's how you can keep track of the names, right? If you think of Damion, think of like demon or something like that, right? It kind of goes together. And if you think of Devon, think of divine, right? So he's the good twin. Damion is the bad twin. So Damion gets in trouble again, and they become estranged. So this is the point. What I'm about to read is the point right at which he gets into trouble for the last time, and Devon cuts his brother off, presumably for the rest of their lives. So, all right, if you have your books, you can read along with me. Let the church read along. 166. All right. So I'm reading right after that page break. So Damion had ended up joining the military. He ended up in Afghanistan. So we're right smack in the middle of the book. I tried to pick a section that incorporated several of the characters and that didn't give too much of the book away. All right, so here we are. It had been 11 months since Damion had left for Afghanistan. He had once flown to Fort Lee, Virginia for some training when he first joined the Army. Besides that, he had never left the state of Georgia, much less the country. When the plane's wheels touched down, his heart palpitated, partly due to flight anxiety, but mostly because because he was excited to be home. He thought of the spread Mama Lee, his mom. He thought of the spread Mama Lee was sure to have when he got home. Damion checked his account. He had earned nearly $7 million in Bitcoin from making drops from Jim and John. He watched the market balloon over the months, and by the time he had made it home to Georgia, the value had more than doubled, worth over $17 million. His heart pounded harder. He still had just over a year left on his enlistment contract, but had thought daily about ways to get an early discharge for some medical condition so he could invent for himself. A volunteer patriot group had tracked all the military flights coming in from overseas. Dozens of them cheered with signs, balloons, and many American flags that they waved for troops as the escalator carried them from the terminal. Damion scanned the crowd. He soon heard the sound of Mama Lee's voice slicing through the airport hum and crowd cheers. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you feared no evil. Hallelujah, she said. She stood between Devon and Uncle Butch. The volunteers had laid down a 25-foot red carpet for the troops to walk as they exited the terminal. A sparkling red, white, and blue welcome home troops banner extended half the length of the carpet above the exit doors. The crowd stood on the other side of a velvet rope. Two speakers on tall stands began to fill the space with Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. Small kids sat on parents' shoulders, holding personalized signs for their soldier. Wives cried, siblings, children, and friends shouted the names of their returning veteran. A boy gave a young black soldier his mini flag. In return, she ripped a subdued Velcro American flag patch from her right shoulder and gave it to him, making his day. As Damion walked the red carpet, he was moved by the big smile on Mama Lee's face and her teary eyes. He had seen that expression many times before, but only for his brother, never for him. Damion had made his mother proud. He video recorded as he approached his family at the end of the carpet. Devon videoed Damion too. Mama Lee extended her arms while Uncle Butch stood in a Superman pose. Wearing a Vietnam veteran hat and a pair of dark aviators. A jolting bump from behind almost knocked Uncle Butch to the floor. Make way, step aside. I need everyone to step aside. No fewer than 15 police in tactical gear had suddenly parted the crowd. Some had ATF and some had DHS printed on their chest, on the chest of their armored vest. They all carried assault rifles and pistols. Damion moved to the side to allow the officers to pass. His eyes grew large when they continued straight towards him. An officer snatched Damion by the sleeve and shoved him to the wall. With a forearm to the back, he bent Damion's arm behind him until he could touch the nape of his own neck. From the speakers now played Irving Berlin's God Bless America. Another officer pulled Damion's bag away and passed it off. The music stopped. The crowd froze, looked on in disbelief. It was now quiet. It was now so quiet that everyone watching could hear the sound of the plastic zip ties clicking as they tightened around Damion's wrist. "They're just cigars," Damion shouted. "All for some GD MF cigars." I am censoring myself because my daughter's right there and my niece. All right. Corporal Damion Lee, a female officer, asked, "And y'all gonna do this in front of my family, my mama, all these people? I'm a veteran. I just got home from Afghanistan. I fought for this country." The officer pulled Damion's wallet from his back pocket to find his ID. The crowd buzzed, then booed and hissed, half recorded their smartphones. A mother buried her son's face into her thigh. The boy's Velcro American patch fell to the floor. "Is all that necessary?" shouted an older black man. "Let go of my son, Mama Lee. Let go of my son." Mama Lee unhooked the velvet rope. With one side of his face pinned to the wall, Damion watched helplessly with one eye as an officer restrained his mom from moving to the scene. The female officer read Damion his Miranda rights, while two large, muscular officers handled him by the biceps, walking him off. "Y'all could have waited," Damion sobbed. His chin pressed hard into his chest. "This ain't right. Y'all didn't have to do me like that in front of my family." "Not again, Damion," Mama Lee cried. "Not again. We believed in you." She stomped with one foot, driving her tan orthopedic into the floor repeatedly. The officers moved him within feet of Mama Lee. He could hear Uncle Bush say to her, "It's time to go, John. Let's get out of here." He watched over his shoulder as Uncle Butch ushered her away by the hand, with consoling pats to the back. Devon trailed behind. He watched as his brother grew smaller in the distance.
So, Drew, just to elaborate on that section, very powerful. Why did you pick that section? What is sort of emblematic of the story that you're trying to tell?
Sure. So I selected this section. First of all, Saki, thank you for helping me select this section. But I selected this section because I felt it was powerful, right? So this story, I want people to get drawn into the story because there is a political message. There's a political message in there that may be unsavory to many of us, right? And these are my ideas, these are my thoughts, and I want people to read the story and get the story, so that they get through so they can get the message and get the message through them. It's sort of like feeding the medicine with the peanut butter. And so this story, I think, puts on display many of the main characters. You have Damion, you have Devon, you have Mama Lee. It puts on display them and just sort of the tension and the suspense that I try to build throughout the book.
Tell us a little bit more about that political message and what sort of questions or themes you would want the reader to go away thinking about once they've read the book.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. This is an excellent question. So the book is called The Devil's Politics, right? How in this country, I think that, and it's just not my thought. This is the reality. It's an empirical fact that we vote exclusively one party. We run exclusively Democrats almost, right? And I think that works to our detriment. And so I weave this conversation throughout the book in the form of conversations between and among characters. And what I'm about to say is not an indictment on any political party. It's not an indictment on the Democratic Party. It's not an indictment on the Republican Party. It's an indictment on the system itself, right? And I think that we need to play on both sides of the aisle when it comes to when it comes to politics in this country. But do you like sports? Kind of.
Superficially watch it, yeah.
Okay. Which one do you prefer?
I grew up in Australia, so different ones. But I mean, we can
soccer. Somebody said soccer.
We can say
all
soccer.
Right, all right, soccer. All right. So I spent a lot of time out of the country, so yeah. Soccer in the United States still hasn't really caught on. Soccer in the United States, and I love soccer, is like one notch below the WWE and one notch above hide and seek. But I love soccer. Imagine playing a game of soccer and your team can't go beyond midfield, right? That's what they call it in soccer, midfield, like the center of it. Imagine playing a game of soccer and your team can't go beyond midfield. You can't win a game like that, right? So in the United States, we have a two-party system. We have the Democrats and we have the Republicans. We are playing on one side of that political field, right? So when you get to a situation where there's a Republican House, Senate, and President, right? We have absolutely no representation in government, and I think that's a problem. I think we should take a strategic approach to how we participate in government, so that these political parties can compete for our vote, right? So imagine if there was only one smartphone maker in the game, right? Imagine if Apple was the only smartphone maker in the game. There would be no incentive for them to make a better camera, a faster processor. There would be no incentive for them to improve their phone. You get what you get, right? But because you have, Android, and other smartphone makers in the game, when Apple makes a phone that goes 3 meters deep in water, Samsung's going to make a phone that goes, 8 meters deep, right? And who wins? The consumer does, right? The consumer wins. That's how politics work. Right? That's exactly how politics work. And so we have, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go on a tangent here, because this is what the essence of this book is about. So what's happening is we're participating on one side of the aisle, and we're not getting the results, right? So we black people in this country, we are substantially the reason that Joe Biden became president. And I mean that, if you look at the numbers show that. Empirically, statistically, the numbers show that in the state of Georgia, listen, first of all, in the United States, we represent about 3.5% of the U.S. population and about 11% of the electorate, right? In the state of Georgia is a highly contested state, right? We represent 33% of the population of Georgia, black people, 33% of the population, but 50% of the Democratic electorate, right? Black people won the state of Georgia for Joe Biden. Same thing in the state of Michigan. In the state of Michigan, we represent about 12% of the population and 20% of the Democratic electorate in the state of Michigan. Black people won. Not for black people, Joe Biden would not have been president, right? What have we gotten, right? The question is, what have we gotten out of that, right? We have, we represent 13.5% of the population, but about 40% of the U.S. federal prison system. About 40% of the U.S. federal prison system, that's a problem, right? We have Kamala Harris, she went to Howard University. I think that's a wonderful school. I went to Hampton. I love Howard. I went to Hampton. But HBCUs in this country, there's about 107 HBCUs in this country, right? With a cumulative endowment of about $4 billion. 107 schools, $4 billion. NYU alone has a $5 billion endowment, right? NYU alone has a $5 billion endowment. That's a problem. We sent $54 billion, or we were just talking about it, we sent $54 billion to the Ukraine, right? We came up with that money in 2-3 weeks, right? We came up with that money in no time. Kids in Flint, Michigan are still being poisoned, right, by the water system. That's a $300 million problem, right? That's a problem for me. And like I said, this is not an indictment on any political party, it's an indictment on the system, right? What happens is that we have the Democrats that will come to us and they'll say, hey, black people, the Republicans said something racist, they did something racist, black people will go to the Republican Party and we'll go, hey, Republicans, did you say that? Did you do that? They'll go, yeah, I said it, yeah, I did it, right? And then we stay, to me, you know, I suspect that there's some collusion between the parties to keep us on one side of the aisle. Because if you keep us on one side of the aisle, then they don't have to do anything for us, right? All they have to do for us is paint Black Lives Matter in the street, right? All they have to do for us is, you know, take down a Confederate statue. I could not care less about a Confederate statue. I want statutes. I want policy. I want real policy that's going to do something for us. And the way we do that is to strategically position ourselves on both sides of the aisle. Listen, if black people, 30% of us voted Republican in the 2020 election, Donald Trump would never have been president. He wouldn't have been president. It would have been some other Republican running against Hillary Clinton, right? So we have to reimagine how we do it. We're being played, right? And I think it's a problem. That's what the book is about. That's what I'm trying to get through to people. And I recognize that this could be kind of politically unsavory for people's ears, and that's why I infused it in a fictional novel. I could have gone ahead and written a professorial treatise on the topic, but the only people who will listen to that would be, you know, scholars.
Why do you think fiction was the better way for you to kind of convey the message as opposed to a nonfiction book?
That's how people consume information. People want to be entertained, right? And people aren't sitting there, you know, I guess in DC, somebody might be sitting there watching CNN or Fox or maybe even C-SPAN, but people want to be entertained. People get, society is moved through art, through music, through television, through film, through fictional works of art. And so that's how you reach people, that's how you reach the masses, and that's what I aim to do with the Devil's Politics.
What is your hope come November?
My hope is something that is probably not going to happen, not right now. People need to get the book, read the book, and internalize it. If that happens before November, cool. I mean, we have elections coming up on July 19th right now. We have primary elections coming up on July 19th. But I don't have high hopes right now at this point for November. I think that we need to have someone there who's speaking. I would love to see a strong black Republican running in a dark blue district, like Prince George's County, right? You have this huge political machine of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Now, if you're a Republican and you're running in a dark red district like Liz Cheney out of Wyoming, the Republican machine, if you say something to go against them, they could come to your district in Wyoming, and they could take away your power, they could take away your seat. But if you have a Republican running out of, say, Prince George's County or Fulton County or Philly or Milwaukee, right? And they're Republican running in a dark blue district, and the Republicans don't like what they have to say, and they come to Fulton County, the Republican machine comes to Fulton County and tries to kick their candidate out who's talking about I'm not talking about any Republican. I'm talking about people who care about black issues, people who care about black political empowerment, people who aren't afraid to speak on it and aren't afraid to act on it, right? And you have somebody who's Republican, who's running in a dark blue district like that, and the Republicans come and try to do what they did to Liz Cheney. Those people down in Atlanta will kick them out of there. Those people in Prince George's County will kick them out on their bus. Those people in Philly, Milwaukee, Oakland will kick them on their butts out of there, and that's what you need. I would love to see about 30 or 40 Republicans, black Republicans, or people who care about black issues running in dark blue districts around the country. It'll be like the Tea Party, right? Because nothing would happen, not a defense bill, would pass, no bill, nothing would happen if that bill in any way works against Black people. And right now we don't have that. Right now we have, and don't get me wrong, this is not all doom and gloom, right? But because Black people, we've come a long way since slavery. We've come a long way since having to sit on the back of the bus. But just like when you're on the bus, when the bus goes faster, we go faster, right? But we're still at the back of the bus, you see? And that's the problem. That's the problem. That's what I'm trying to get at. That's what those politics is at.
Do you see yourself in a political future at all?
I don't know. Right now, I'm writing books and I'm getting my ideas out there. If people like it, then that's great. But I don't know. I don't put much thought into that.
Do you have any ideas for future books? Do you think it's something you will continue to do?
So the sequel to this is probably about halfway done. And obviously I won't say the name or anything right now, but right now it's all about devil's politics and getting this into people's hands and getting people's ideas about the book. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to turn it over to everyone here. If anyone has any questions for Drew, please raise your hand.
Yeah. So I work on the Hill, and I was a political science major back in school, and I kind of looked into this stuff because I went to a theater class, so all the Black stuff went to me. So, and I've been seeing they are recruiting. They're like what your idea is saying. Well, they're recruiting in a different way, where it's just a black face, but conservative ideas. But I feel like the main ways, if you focus on the primaries, because I feel like nobody votes in the primaries. Like nobody knew DC. Nobody knew DC had like a mayor. Yeah, you saw the stuff, but you didn't know when to vote. And I see that everywhere. And I think a good way to hijack stuff is if everybody knows, this is a primary day. This is when to go. It leads into a question.
Yeah.
But where this country is going, I'm like, are you optimistic that your theory can work? Because the GOP is more strategic than the Democratic Party.
No doubt about it.
And I think that's a fact. So do you see that actually is a future where they actually have pro-Black candidates running in those super blue districts?
I think it's an uphill sort of struggle because you're talking about changing people's minds about politics, politics is emotional. Politics gets at your heart. So it's a hard thing to do. And that's what this conversation is about. I want to start the conversation, at least because no one's talking about it. So I don't know. I'm optimistic for sure. But the Tea Party happened. So perhaps something like this could happen. You mentioned the primaries. That was a really good point, right? Because if 30% of Black America voted in the Republican primaries, or in the primaries, so here's how it works, right? So in the United States, 50%, about half of the states have closed primaries. And what a closed primary means is that if you can only vote in the primary if you are of that particular party, if you're in a closed primary, right? So because we vote exclusively Democratic, we don't get to participate in the Republican primary. We don't get to choose who gets on the Republican ticket. That's a problem, right? So if you happen to be white in this country, right, you have the luxury of voting your party affiliation in both the primary and the general election, because at the end of the day, there are large numbers of white people on the Republican side of the aisle and large numbers of white people on the Democratic side of the aisle. So no matter who wins, presumably your interests are going to get served. And so but because we vote exclusively one party, we don't have that. We don't have a say in who gets on the Republican ticket. That's how Donald Trump got on the ticket. He would not have gotten on the ticket but for us. If we had participated in the Republican primary, somebody else would have. They would have run against Hillary Clinton, and at least, another thing, I'm sorry, you hit on a bunch of things, right? and I hit on this in the book too, because you're a staffer on the Hill. Devon, the main character, is a staffer on the Hill. He makes some $30,000 a year, right? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but he makes some $30,000 a year. But listen. Let me tell you about this though, right? These are really, really powerful positions, right? As a staffer, even if you are just some assistant, I shouldn't say just some assistant, but if you're a legislative assistant, this is an important position because you are the filter between policy ideas and how that stuff gets to that member of Congress. But if you come from an economically disadvantaged background, right, you can't afford to be in this really prestigious position. So what happens is you have these people who aren't black, who have trust funds, they don't need that $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 a year, right? They're using that to pay for their, mimosas or whatever they're drinking at brunch, right? But if you're black and you are talented and you have the chops to work on the Hill, you just can't afford to, spend, make $30,000, $40,000, then you're boxed out of that. And I think that's a huge problem. I kind of touch on that in those politics too.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay, I got two questions.
Yep.
So some of the best movies are made out of books. Are you opposed to a movie being produced out of this book?
You know what? Let me talk. First of all, no, I'm not, right? But let me talk about movies. I'm really glad you asked that question, right? Let's think about what are some movies with strong black casts, right? You have movies like Set It Off. Anybody seen Set It Off?
Yeah.
All right, one of my favorite movies. Queen and Slim. Who's seen that?
Yeah.
All right, one of my favorite movies. Dead Presidents. What? Say that one more time.
Everybody died.
Everybody died. All the black people died, right? So why is it that for a movie to be good, for a movie to be commercially successful at the box office, if you saw the way that movie could have been amazing, Queen and Slim. But they showed these two beautiful black people dying in the most brutal of ways. And spoiler alert, the black people win in the devil's politics.
Do you have a second question as well?
The second question was around politics, right? If you did run,
Yep.
would you run as a Republican?
There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. I'm a registered Republican in Prince George's County, Maryland, and I don't have a problem saying that, right? You can call me whatever you want. I know what I'm about. I love black people. I love us, and there's nobody who's going to tell me anything different. And I'm never going to do anything that runs contrary to our interests.
Yes, I have a question. So it's in relation to the book. I did complete it, so I hope no spoilers. But you mentioned that you feel like you're getting played in terms of black people voting Democrat. Do you feel like you conveyed in the book, or did you, or how did you convey for black people to kind of open up their eyes to being Republican? And the reason I ask that is because the interaction between the senator and Devon didn't seem like something that out of the way you portrayed the senator's relationship. So how do you feel?
So I appreciate that, right? So she's kind of pushing back on me. Amanda, thank you very much. She read the entire book from front to end in like 2 or 3 days, and she's kind of pushing back. My understanding is that you don't feel that I adequately conveyed the message that I just talked about. And that's a good criticism. I did my best to do it through both conversations between and among the characters. But if you think about what happened in the very beginning of the book, I'm not going to spoil it. If you think about what happened, at some point, initially, Devon was being played and controlled by this congressman, right? By the end of the book, right, Devon was doing the playing, Devon was doing the controlling, right? So he's using these political parties he's using the Republican Party with both parties to suit in a strategic way, in the way that I'm talking about. So I hope that came out. It's my mom.
So Andrew, how much of this book came from your personal life?
So all of it, right? So everything. Oh, no. Let me not say all of it. FBI's gonna come. Do it. But right, exactly, right. But that's a really good question, right? So you have Damion and Devon. Damion was in the military. I was in the military. Devon went to law school in Georgia. I went to law school in Georgia. And so everything in this book is rooted some way in my life or just my observations. So, if you pick every little, most of the big things that happen in this book, there are real life historical accounts of something very similar happening in the world, and I just built a fictional story around it.
So I feel like, obviously I'm British, but I feel like Americans, Black Americans have distrust with Republicans. How do you see getting over that distrust to achieve your objective? How do you build that trust?
That's Sylvia. Sylvia, she's acknowledged in the back of the book. She helped me a good deal with thoughts. I'm sorry, you said the part.
Like how we go about building that trust between the Republican Party and Black Americans. I feel like there's a lot of mistrust there.
Listen, we can't. I don't trust either party, right? And I think it shouldn't be about whether you trust the party or not. It's a strategic thing, right? I'm going to make you do what you said you would do. We put a president in office, make him do what you said you're going to do. And the only way this is all about, you trust but verify, right? This is all about, it's not about trusting them, right? If we have a carrot, if we have a stick, right? We don't have to trust. We know what's going to happen, right? And our stick is how we're going to vote, and if the Republican Party knows that they could potentially get our vote, then they're going to court our vote. If the Democratic Party knows they could potentially get our vote, then they're going to court our vote. That's our stick. That's the thing that we're going to use to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. We want to be in a position. We've been trusting way too long.
We need to hold them accountable.
We need to hold them accountable. We've been trusting for way too long. Republican parties tell us, or the parties, tell us every single election cycle that they're going to do and none of those things happen. We've been trusting way too long, so it's time to stop trusting. It's time to actually do something to make them do what they say they're going to do. Yes, Cerise.
Yes, so I have a question. Is America a republic or a democracy?
America's a representative republic. America's a republic or a representative democracy. So those two things mean the same. And what are you kind of getting at?
So there was, I was listening to Dr. King's speech the other day. When I was revisiting an article published in the Informer that featured the Black agenda, not candidates. Because if I'm hearing you're saying that Black political power needs to be centered around the accountability of what either party is saying they're going or should be doing.
Right.
And Dr. King's speech directly mentions America as our republic.
Yeah. So you're going back to civics class, but when we're talking about being a republic or a democracy, a democracy, a pure democracy is, you vote for every single issue, versus a republic where it's a representative democracy where we vote for candidates who go in and vote and do things based on our interests, based on the interest of their electorate. But back to the point that Dr. King point, I think I remember what you're talking about, and I agree, right? I think what's happening is that we're voting for party, irrespective of policy, right? And we need to be doing it the other way around. We need to be voting policy, irrespective of party, right? So.
I kind of had a couple points.
Yep.
I forgot to mention money. So that's another reason why, kind of like a little bit, it's not a flaw, but a hardship. So like you mentioned Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney has all her donors sold out from the GOP. I mean, she has Bush and the Cheney donors, keeping her alive. You don't have that party loyalty there. And I feel like that's the one thing the GOP knows its loyalty lies with white people and Hispanics now. It's a growing amount of the Democrats and black men are going to be more GOP. So what I feel like the trend they're going is, okay, we don't need to change because nationalistically they don't need to be pro-black. Black people are already joining their cause, and we see black men following suit. Soon, more black women are going to follow slowly, but not as fast as black men. They've come in suit. Hispanics have already come through. We came through during Bush years too. My point is that what would convince them to even let this happen? Because we know white people are very violent when black people gain power. Just one black president, only 2 terms, set them on a 360 with Donald Trump, and those 4 years are costing us a lifetime with the Supreme Court. I know that's a long lead up,
Yeah.
but my question is what makes them actually change course? Obviously, you force their hand by getting elected, but they're violent.
You're absolutely right. Tell me your name one more time.
Huh?
Your name one more time.
Oh, Jordan.
Jordan. All right, Jordan. You're absolutely right. The key is holding their feet to the fire, making them, how do I say it? Hold true to that. You wrote this check. We're going to cash it. And what's happening over the years is that they've constantly moved the goalposts, right? So slavery, right, went into Jim Crow. Mass incarceration supplanted Jim Crow, and so every single time things change, the goalpost gets moved, right? But we need to make them continue to move that goalpost. At the very least, at least try. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, I love the message already. I actually work on a campaign for a Black Republican in Maryland who is working with other constituents, other people who are politicians on this Black idea, this Black race first politics and ideology. I have issues. I got questions. How do we reconcile and resolve our feelings if the Republican Party continues to act in the way that they do? We see Herschel Walker put in the forefront with absolutely nothing in between the ears. How do we reconcile what they're doing while also being a part of that party, and how do we resolve that within ourselves?
We need to get rid of the feel. We need to. Politics is emotional for sure, but we need to extract ourselves from those feelings and think strategically, right? And that's how we do it. So we have a Herschel Walker who won down in Georgia, and like you said, nothing between the ears, right?
And a Burgess Owens in Utah. I mean, oh dear God.
Yeah, I mean the list goes on and on and on and on. So I think the key is to read the devil's politics, right? And we need to begin to think strategically. Like I said, if we put 30 to 40 Black Republicans or people who care about Black issues in the House of Representatives, there's 435 of them. All we need is about 35 of that 435. And we put somebody in Maryland, in Texas, and there's this caucus of people. Listen, the Congressional Black Caucus is 100% Democratic. That's a problem to me.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
And so what we need to do is, one, get away from these feelings and start thinking strategically. And two, we need to run candidates in blue districts, run Republican candidates in blue districts that care about Black issues.
Thank you.
I have a question over here in the back. Sorry, I'm sitting.
Hey, Uncle Tommy.
Hey, Andrew. And congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
I hear everybody's conversation, comments about, the things that we should be doing today, tomorrow, next day. What about those little ones that's sitting right there, my grandson, and those of you who have kids? What are we doing to convey this same type of information to them? And are you hopeful that this book will then reach some of them? And I say that with us being from this district, I'm also from Southeast, grew up on Minnesota Avenue, 37th place. How do you get this information to us that grew up in those, my term here, downtrodden areas where we have a library where they may not have anything that we need because we're being told what to read and what not to read. So how do you get to, I'm going to use myself, how do you get to me as a young black man growing up in Southeast DC? How do you get that message to me? I can't afford that book.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful point. First of all, I think that we need to, as parents, as older people, we need to make sure that our children are a part of this process. Right. When it's time, first of all, we need to vote, and when we vote, we need to bring our kids so that they can see that. Right. We need to have conversations. When we're sit down and have dinner with your kids. When I was a kid, my mom, sister, and I, we would sit down and have dinner. We would talk about things, talk about these issues, talk about politics, right? We don't do that. We tend to, sit on Instagram, TikTok, and do all these things, right? But now we have computers in our pockets. These aren't even phones. These are computers sitting in our pockets. Back in the day, in the 90s and the 80s, if I wanted to know something, right, I had to go find an encyclopedia, right? I had to walk down to Anacostia Library and check out a book. Now we have unlimited information in our pockets on a regular, at any moment's notice, we can pull unlimited information. We need to use that information. We don't have to listen to what everything the teacher tells us. We don't have to listen to everything anybody tells. We can do our own research. Do that research, have these conversations with your kids. Audrey, we listen to NPR, and we don't listen to music in my car, do we? We listen to NPR. Take it out of your mouth. Take it out of your mouth. We listen to NPR 100% of the time in my car. Right? That's my daughter, Audrey. Say hi, everybody. Okay. Can you?
I just want to make sure you have at least 45 minutes.
Yeah. Please.
And, yeah, move on.
So what she was saying is we're going to do a couple more questions, and then I need to get
Make
to
sure
something.
everybody gets their book signed.
I guess my question is, is there a place or a space for allyship for white people? What's the place? Because I know for myself, I'll get into it with obviously anybody, family members, whoever. You know me.
100%.
You know me.
There's no doubt about it. I try to be precise in my language, right? So when I said I have black people running these districts or people who care about black issues, that's why I said that. That's who every single time I said that, I intentionally do that to, make sure, because you have people like Jenna and my good friend Justin and all these, good people who care. Black people aren't the only ones who care about black issues. We could not have gotten out of slavery through our own efforts. It could not have happened. We could not have gotten the Civil Rights Act of 1964 or the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed without the allyship of white people and other people who care about black issues. So not only do we welcome you, we need you. There's no doubt about that. We represent 13.5% of the population, right? That's not it can be pivotal in an election, right? But it's not on its own. It's not the determinative of an election.
Yep.
Hey, so David Lee,
LJ came, my longest friend from Hampton University, was my roommate, 2002. He lives in Costa Rica, came up here to see me for this.
All right, now you guys made me nervous. So you discussed the structural issues that don't address us as African Americans in general, right? and we're not participating because we're on one side of the aisle, essentially. I think, can you talk about that a little bit more? So like, for example, me as an entrepreneur, I'm a resident of a blue state, and I exclusively invest in red states. And the reality is black money matters. That's where the power is in this country, just the way that the structure is. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's a really critical point, because it's very central in everything for us, from protection of ourselves to everything.
Listen, politics, nothing happens in politics without money. Nothing happens in politics without money. Everything from the property taxes that we pay, you name it, any issue that we're talking about, the guns, I think you mentioned guns, or all these things, it's all about money. You can't get into an election. My friend Sharice, just ran for office, right? You have to raise money, right? So what that means is, I would love to see, when we have those candidates, like we would have, say, a black Republican from Fulton County or from Philly who's out there talking about black issues, or a person who cares about black issues who's running as a Republican, we need to go support that person financially, right? We need to donate to their campaigns. We need to volunteer our time, all right? And that's frankly anybody, whether you're on the Democratic side of the aisle or the Republican side of the aisle. When we have these candidates talking black issues, like my friend Sharice here, we need to get her money to run for her next campaign, which I will support you for.
That's right.
I had another thought. All right, yeah.
There's so much to unpack on that.
Yeah.
Welcome from Costa Rica.
Bienvenidos.
I just had a question about just like, does the book talk about like what that strategy actually is, right? Like, because I know that you sound like we could like sort of divide and conquer, right? But I feel like that's something that's extremely calculated, right? Like for instance, me, I don't think I would have it in me to like separate myself from issues that directly impact my community in a way to say, oh, like just separate your feelings, vote for Republican. I'm not going to do that unless for a fact I know that the numbers work to where it actually impacts the square of like the judgment of the different parties, right? And so I guess like to say, oh, like we need to do that seems very mythical, but like is there an actual pulse or like something that can like actually translate into, okay, this will work if you do it this way. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense to say, oh, like go vote Republican and everyone votes Republican, and we're just like on the other side.
I'm glad. I'm sorry. What's your name?
Tyree,
thank you very much. You jogged my memory. I was trying to think of what I was. You jogged my memory. This book is not about a mass exodus of black people from the Democratic Party to the Republican side of the aisle. We'll be in the exact same position if that happens, right? That's decades ago, black people were mostly Republicans, and then it switched, right? And so I'm not talking about the mass exodus of black people from one side of the aisle to the other, right? So I needed to get that out earlier in the in this talk, but thank you very much for jogging my memory. Tell me what your question is.
I was asking if the book.
Oh yes, yeah. Does the book? Yeah. So I try not to get into the nitty gritty of policy because it kind of take away from the story. The goal of this book was to be a conversation starter, to get the conversation started about it. Right, and there are a lot of people who are, I'm a political scientist, political science major, I'm a lawyer, all these things, right? But there are people out there who are a lot smarter than me who can work out the nitty-gritty details. But the numbers, the numbers work, right? If 30% of black people voted Republican, Donald Trump would not have won, right? If half of those, that 50% of black Democrats in Georgia didn't vote for Joe Biden doesn't win. And there's another thing, one last point, because I almost said didn't vote, right? I was talking to someone recently, and she said to me, well, why vote anyway? Why get out there and vote anyway? Let me tell you what that looks like. What staying home for black people looks like is this. In Ferguson, in 2015, Michael Brown was killed in 2015 Ferguson. 67% black. The city was 67% black, right? Police chief was white. The mayor was white. Of the 6 city council members, 1 was black, right? That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like when we stay home. So we have to participate. We can't operate in the system. We can't operate in the system without, you're a journalist, right? So if you have a story and you want to get an interview from someone and they decline your interview, what's going to happen? You're going to run your story anyway, without their perspective, right?
Or it will be acknowledged that they declined.
Exactly. So what's going to happen? You can't stay home, right? The train is going to keep moving, with or without you. If you're not on it, it's just going to run you over, and that's what happened in Ferguson, right? That's what happened in a lot of places around the country. All right, so we can't stay home.
I really have to ask this question because it just ties into everything like me. You know, we were able to get a unanimous resolution in support of reparations for black people. Now, you mentioned Herschel earlier. He is a stark advocate against reparations for black people. And I'm curious to know, is there an allyship or such thing as being an ally if you're black or any other color, if you are anti-reparations? And what does that look like from a black Republican?
Listen, I have no idea. If anybody who's against reparations for black people, I can't conceptualize why there would be. Why? Listen, we literally built this country. Right? We literally built this country. I can't imagine why somebody would be against that. We gave it to the Japanese who were interned in World War II. In the 90s, they got actual cash money, reparations from the U.S. government for their internment. Yeah. It happened, right? So I can't imagine. I mean, it'd be very expensive, but let me tell you, that's what we need to do. We need to that should be a part of the black agenda, right? Reparations should be a part of the black agenda, and the way you do that is you make these political parties compete for our vote. They're not doing it right now.
Part of the American agenda.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
I just want to make sure we have time to do the signing. So if we continue, if you've got questions, maybe ask Drew as you're getting books
You can
signed.
reach out to me on Instagram or wherever, or call me. Most of you have my number, so.
So let's hand it to you once more, and thank you to Sequoia. Thank you all for coming out. It's an awesome event and a great discussion.
Thank you very much, Holly, and Busboys and Poets. Thank you guys. Andy Shalal, I know he's in Cuba right now, I think. Andy, thank you. And everybody here, I really appreciate it.
And Sequoia would have liked to.
And Sequoia, 100% Sequoia and Ashley and everybody at the Angelo Publication. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.